Good evening. This is Erik Prince coming to you on Off Leash. Today I had a momentous day. Finished my first criminal trial. After a 9-year nonsense investigation by 6 different prosecutors, the leftist-dominated Green Party Interior Minister charged myself, a company, and a couple of other guys with violating the War Materials Act. They claim that we violated by exporting an airplane. It was an airplane with a camera. And after a 1.5-day trial, we were acquitted on all charges. So let me just read my statement, because certainly the liberal media won't get it right. This entire process was an unnecessary waste of time and resources fueled by left-wing politicians to weaponize institutions against those they don't like. The so-called media, in a pathetic attempt to be relevant, stitched lies together into one big fraud against airborne technologies, myself and others. I'm thankful we had the resources to defend ourselves. VKK Law did an excellent job in organizing our defense. I feel sorry for those who cannot afford good advocates. So that was my statement. And I appreciate what President Trump is going through a little bit now. He's been hit at it from 4 different directions. In this case, it was a very left-wing prosecutor. Could have even been stimulated by people in the United States, by the DOJ. I don't know that. I have maximum respect for people in law enforcement, but there are a few bad eggs that mess it up. And you know, there's an old saying, what happens if you give an asshole a gun and a badge? You get a bigger asshole. Those of you who are choosing to politicize your office and pursue politically motivated investigations and harassments, be careful. Look it up. Sow the wind, reap the whirlwind. This is not how you keep a harmonious society together. So that's it, Mark. It's not a comfortable place to be. I was never really worried. As my lawyer said in his closing statement, 7 times 0 is always 0. The prosecutor, he didn't provide one scintilla of evidence, not a microgram of any valid evidence whatsoever. In fact, even their government's expert witnesses agreed with us on every step as he was trying to describe how an airplane was militarized. And it's disgusting. And I really feel bad for people that get charged with crimes that do not have the resources to pay good legal advocates. So, and that is the DOJ way of overcharging people, so they just take a deal. And that is a grotesque injustice that needs to be fixed.
Okay, Erik. So you are coming hot out of this trial. And we got some things to unpack here because a lot of people don't know the background of your case. So this came from the Interior Minister from the Green Party and the government of Austria, and charges against you and your associates were first filed 9 years ago.
Their investigation, the proctology, began 9 years ago based on some crazy left-wing media reporting, stitching complete lies and nonsense together by former disgruntled substance abusing employees that were fired. And, one bad decision led to another in these idiots pursuing a case.
So at what point were you indicted or charges were brought up against you?
It was about 6 or 8 months ago. So I was not indicted. It was like a misdemeanor.
Understood.
It's interesting. I was never arrested, never booked, never fingerprinted, nothing like that. They just said, show up for trial on this day. And it's a 2-day trial. It was a 1-day trial in November and a 1-day trial today. I think the judge would have thrown out the case after the first day because there was not a shred of evidence presented. But I think she just wanted to make it completely appeal proof and hear the rest of the witness slate. And before noon today, after another 2.5 hours in court, it was done. But how ridiculous.
Incredible.
A waste of good money, tired, I went from productive activity in the United States, flying halfway around the world to be here, to waste 2.5 hours in court. Anyway, a sobering lesson, again, for people that get the raw end of the stick from law enforcement, from politicized, weaponized justice. It is exceedingly, exceedingly dangerous because they can't keep doing this.
They ran a multi-year investigation before they even charged you with the misdemeanor.
They went through 6 different prosecutors. They finally got the 6th one that was ordered to file the charges.
And what potential consequences, had you been found guilty, were you facing?
I think up to 3 years.
3 years in jail in Austria for effectively bogus, fake political charges.
Yep.
So you got the Trump treatment. And what's powerful about, to me, what's most powerful about what you said, Erik, is this. We take your experience over years and years and years. You fought them. You had the resources, thank God, to do it, and the right advocates by your side, and you beat them. And let's go back to America and think about the hundreds of people who are in the gulag still today, in the gulag in Washington, D.C. from January 6th. And the folks who didn't have the wherewithal, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the advocates, by the way, some of whom ultimately took their own lives. And that's the power that these prosecutors have here in the United States. And it's not just a few bad apples. It's the U.S. Department of Justice that has gone bad and rogue and has persecuted these people in America.
Yes, all the while the billions of dollars of property damage and dozens of deaths that resulted from the BLM sponsored, funded riots, no prosecutions, no nothing. That is a grotesque injustice, and it must be rectified.
Well, and on top of that, it wasn't just the U.S. Department of Justice. It was the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives up until this year who ran this ridiculous fake January 6th committee. They dragged people in for deposition after deposition, none of which transcripts and evidence doesn't exist. They destroyed it, which is clearly an illegal act. So you had the U.S. Department of Justice on one side, you had the U.S. Congress run by the Democrats on the other side, and it's all bogus. But the effects are very long lasting. And then, of course, you've got Donald Trump, who's being dragged from court to court to try to influence the outcome of the presidential election in 2024. That's what's at stake with this overzealous prosecution in the United States.
When we look at, for the State Department to complain about Iran with the Guardian Council approving which candidates can run in their national elections, or to see what Maduro is doing to the opposition parties in Venezuela, closing a hotel, closing a restaurant, if people go there, locking up all their staff. Sadly, our Justice Department has sunk to that level of behavior in politicizing free speech. I so reject the people that call the January 6th nonsense an insurrection, because that would be the first time in the history of humanity, especially in a country where there's more than 300 million personally owned firearms, for someone to show up to a so-called insurrection, is what they want to call it, that was unarmed. There's not been one firearms-related charge related to January 6th. So everybody showed up to protest, and nobody had a gun. Not an insurrection.
Well, and look, you are off U.S. shores right now at an undisclosed location. You've had to fight against this overzealous prosecution of you and your associates. What you probably haven't had a chance to see is presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy did a CNN town hall with a host, Abby Phillips, and she challenged him. He said in the broader debate last week that January 6th was an inside job. And she came at him and at him and at him. And what did he have for proof was we now have 200 hours of videotapes. We now have evidence that the police were shooting tear gas into the crowd, provoking them, opening the doors wide open to bring them in. This was indeed an inside job with FBI informants that were in that crowd. And so this is impossible for the average man, the average person, to be able to counter the force of government when it's used for political persecution. Last word in this segment from you, Erik.
Sow the wind, reap the whirlwind. Beware. This is not how you continue good conduct in a republic.
Well, we've got to turn this around. And if you want to learn more about the overzealous prosecutions in the United States, or frankly, if you want to learn more about what's happening in this world, you're in the right place. This is Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. Come back to us in a minute. We've got our next segment to talk about what's happening, the latest in the war against Israel. Right after this.